So I want to do, be sure this is recording. Okay, looks like it is. So I want to do a fairly quick tutorial, not an hour-long tutorial like some of the other introduction to videos that I've done, like the introduction to Windows and the introduction to Linux and so forth videos. This one is going to be an introduction to Antergos Arch Linux. And I'll spell this out in my terminal here. You'll notice I have my terminal open because I don't want you to focus on the desktop environment, all of this stuff here, because that's not really relevant to this video. The distribution that I'm using is called Antergos, as you see there, Antergos, Antergos, and it's based on, as you see there, Arch Linux, which is another distribution of Linux. Antergos is a fork of Arch, meaning it's based on Arch, but it has some tweaks that make it different from Arch itself. Now, if you go back and you watch, and I would encourage you to do this if you're viewing this video and you don't have the background of the beginning of Linux video, go back to the beginning of Linux video, and in that video I explain what Linux is and so forth. So you'll get that background that you need in order to understand what I'm going to be talking about in this video. This is a distribution of Linux. It's an operating system that's based on Linux, which is a kernel, and I explain all of that in the other video. And Antergos is based on Arch. So, in the introduction to Linux video, the distribution that I was using is Ubuntu. Ubuntu is a fork, which is just a way of saying it's based on Debian. And there's some key differences between Debian and all of the operating systems that are based on Debian, like for example Ubuntu, and Arch, and all of the distributions that are based on Arch, like for example Antergos, which is what we're using right now. One of the differences is the way that you enter terminal commands to do things like install packages and that type of thing. In Debian and Debian-based distributions like Ubuntu, you would be typing in things like sudo apt-get install or sudo apt-get update. Again, you see all of that in the other video introduction to Linux, or beginning with Linux. I can't remember what I called it, but you see that in the other video on Linux, the first one that I did. And the reason why that command is entered that way is that you're using aptitude. That's the package manager and so on. So that's the structure of those commands. In Arch, we're not using aptitude, and when I say Arch, I'm also talking about Antergos as well. So in Arch and by extension Antergos, which is what I'm using, your commands are different. So in that, you're going to be doing sudo pacman, because pacman is the package manager, and you might understand that pacman package man manager. So it's just a cute little play on words there. So you're using pacman, so it would be sudo pacman, and then your commands like -s, and then your package name. So some of the commands are going to look a little bit different, but the basics of entering in terminal commands and all, which you see in the other video with beginning with Linux, is going to be the same thing. That you are going to need to be able to do some terminal commands, and because unlike Ubuntu, you don't have a software center where you're going to go and you're going to come down here, for example, and click an icon for a software manager that's going to launch a graphical interface of a program that you can search within to find programs and install them all within that. You don't have that with this, so you're going to have to use your terminal to install programs, it's the only option you have for installing programs, so, which means that this is a little bit more advanced than Ubuntu. So if you're a completely new Linux user, you may not want to start off in Arch. But the other significant difference between Arch and Arch-based distributions from Debian and Debian-based distributions like Ubuntu is the way that the releases are done. So and I'm going to use Ubuntu as an example because it's what I was using in the beginning of the Linux video. The way that a lot of, I would say most, Linux distributions release updates is what's called a fixed release model. And when you do fixed releases, it means that all of the releases, all of the upgrades to the operating system and programs and things like that are done on a schedule. And the downside to that is that it can be months or even years before a critical upgrade to things like security or stability improvements, those sorts of things, get onto your system. If you look at Ubuntu's release schedule, for example, they do one about every 6 months. They'll do a release in April, and then they go and they do another release in October, and then they do another release in April. And that's their fixed release schedule. And so you're looking at 6 months where there could be an improvement that's out there that you could have on your system, but it hasn't been put into the operating system yet because it's not going to be until they do the new release in 6 months. The upside to doing a fixed release, like what Ubuntu and most of the other distributions do, though, is that things theoretically have been tested a bit more. It's not brand new, spanking new, bleeding edge kind of software that is being released and you're putting it on your system and you could end up running into a bug or a problem or that sort of thing. So that's the downside and the upside to a fixed release. Arch, and again by extension Antergos, which is what I'm using, does what's called a rolling release. And what a rolling release essentially means is that the second that there is a package update or a package upgrade or an update or an upgrade to the operating system itself, that's released and you can download it and you can install it on your system that instant. The advantage to that is your system is going to stay as current as can be. I mean, you're going to be right on the bleeding edge. But the downside to that is that if there's a problem, then it's not as likely to be caught. Because again, if you're talking about to use Ubuntu for an example, in that 6 month period of time, theoretically, Ubuntu Canonical, which is the company that owns Ubuntu, they're going to be testing it and they're going to find it and they're going to fix it and get things to work. And you don't have the benefit of all those weeks, months, whatever of testing with a rolling release where you're on the bleeding edge of what's out there. So that's kind of the downside. The upside being again that your software is going to be as current as can be. The second that there's an upgrade or an update released, you can put it on your system if you choose. And that is the thing, though, is that there is a matter of choice here. You don't have to do a system update every day, or like I do multiple times a day if you don't want to. You can wait to check for an update or an upgrade for a week if you want. And then there's also options too within the system to where you can be on a safer update track than a testing track too. So there's options there that make it a little bit safer. And I will tell you too that I've been using Arch for Antergos, which is Arch based. I've been using Arch for months now, something like 7, 8, 9 months, and I have not had a catastrophic problem in the least. So I'm kind of inclined to think that unless you are a real a real novice and you just really absolutely don't know what you're doing, you're probably not really going to have any problem with a rolling release. That's my personal observation based on my own personal experience. And what I'm going to do in this video is I'm going to explain a little bit more about Arch, and then we're going to get into just a few of the real basic, most used terminal commands that you're going to need to know in order to use Arch efficiently. There's more terminal commands than what I'm going to show you, but they're a little bit more obscure and you're not as likely to need to know them. So let me be sure that I've hit all the points that I want. Oh, okay. Now I do want to get into what the difference between Antergos and Arch is. Antergos, again, being a distribution that's based on Arch. The difference between Antergos and Arch is that Antergos is a little bit more user-friendly. It's going to be easier for a person that's a beginner or an intermediate sort of user to use than Arch is. With Arch, you have to do a lot more do-it-yourself type of stuff. You're going to be installing your own desktop environment and all of that in from scratch. And it's a little bit more complicated than most people, really even than most intermediate or advanced users, are really going to want to fool with. So, this is just a way of kind of, I don't want to say dumbing things down, but kind of keeping things a little bit more user-friendly, a little bit simpler, a little friendlier, and also saving you a lot of time over having to compile everything yourself and basically build your whole system yourself. Antergos is basically Arch that has had a lot of the groundwork, whatever you want to call it, done for you. You have a graphical installer, like you have with Ubuntu, which makes the install process a lot easier. And it's bundled with some of the key things that you're going to need to have a working system. You can choose between several different desktop environments, and I'll get into other desktop environments in another video where my plan is to dedicate a video per desktop environment and show you the different desktop environments, because the desktop environment therefore isn't really something we need to worry about with this video. We're only dealing with terminal commands. That's why I'm not showing the desktop environments, because it's irrelevant to what I'm discussing in the video. It's irrelevant to the core nature of the system. But when you go to install Antergos, you're getting the benefit of Arch, the rolling release and pacman and all of those kinds of things. But you have things like package managers, and your yaourt comes with it, so you can use yaourt, and I'll show you what yaourt and all that is. You can use yaourt to find packages within the Arch user repository, or R, A-U-R, the letter R. And that sort of thing comes with it. You have LibreOffice that comes with it. You have some printer drivers from the HP printer driver packages and stuff comes with it. So there's a lot of that kind of work that has been done for you, which again saves you time and makes it a lot easier to use. And you don't have to try and figure all of this stuff out yourself and build it yourself from scratch. So it's just easier. Okay, so that's the difference between Arch and Antergos. Now, moving on, the terminal commands. Now, everything that I'm going to talk about from here on is going to assume that you have Antergos installed and that you're not using Arch itself. Okay, so you're using Antergos, which is based on Arch, but you're not using Arch. And the reason why I'm saying that is because with Antergos, the R manager, again AUR, that you're going to be using to search for Arch user repository packages and that kind of thing, is going to be yaourt. And so you're going to have to use the yaourt command on that. So this is pretty specific, some of it, to Antergos over Arch, where you have other options of things that you can install to use for managing that sort of thing. Now, the pacman commands, and you'll see what I mean by pacman command, that is going to be the way that it's done across Arch and all of its distributions that are forks of Arch, like Antergos. Okay, so some of the terminal commands that you're going to need to use. And again, I'm going to go through all of the sort of main ones that you need are, let's see, I have notes here, so I'm going to just check my notes. Okay, so to do a system update, and this is going to check your mirrors and everything for any updates, upgrades to your system. And there's a couple of ways of doing it. I'm going to show you the two that I think are the best. So again, we have yaourt installed, so this is going to be kind of Arch specific, or if you're using yaourt on this is going to be Antergos specific, or if you're using an Arch or another Arch based distribution and you're using a different program for finding things on the Arch user repositories and so on, then let me think. No, if you're using yaourt on Arch or whatever, and you're not using one of the others, then this would apply to you too. Sorry, didn't mean to confuse anybody. So in other words, this is if you have yaourt, and you're going to know if you have yaourt. If you're in Arch, you have yaourt. If you are, I'm getting confused again. If you're using Antergos, if you're using Antergos, you've got yaourt. If you're using Arch or another Arch-based distribution, you may have yaourt, you may not. You may have something else. Okay, so let me say that again to be clear, since I was confusing myself even. If you are using Antergos, you have yaourt. This command is going to apply to you if you're using Antergos, because you have yaourt for sure. If you're using Arch or another Arch-based distribution aside from Antergos, you may have yaourt, you might not. It kind of depends, and so this command could be a little different in that case. In our case, again, I'm assuming from here on out that you're using Antergos, just like I am, because that's what I'm really talking about is Antergos. Yes, I'm talking about Arch too, but I'm really sticking more to Antergos specifically. So anyway, so in order to do a check for your system upgrades, updates, there's a little bit of a difference, so I don't want to use those terms interchangeably. But in order to check if there's new, in other words, if there's an update or an upgrade to your system or to packages, there's two sort of primary ways that we can do this. We can do yaourt, yaourt. You come in space, and we do a dash. It's just that little minus symbol on your keyboard. So, the minus key. Minus dash, I call it a dash. Minus capital S, Y, Y, Y. Now, you can do SYU, okay, but that's not going to check your mirrors. It's not going to refresh the package list, and it's not going to check your mirrors. And so the problem that you'll run into if you just do SYU is that if you've done if an update at some point had updated or upgraded your mirrors list, then it can end up returning that there's no, it'll just basically tell you we can't find anything on, anywhere. There's no mirrors or anything. We can't find anything, and so you'll be stuck, and you'll be kind of going, okay, well, how do I upgrade my system if it won't even find? So to get around the problem that can pose, what we do is we say SYU, and all that does is it tells it to not only do a check for an upgrade or an update to the package list, but also to check for any changes in your mirrors list as well. So this is just a way of kind of saving you a headache. So this is what we're going to use. Yaourt space minus symbol or dash, I call it a dash, capital S Y Y Y U, and then we're going to hit space, and we're going to do a dash dash or minus minus. There's no space in between there. It's just one right after the other. It may look like there's a space, but there's not, because you can see the difference between putting a space in and taking it out. See the larger gap there. So don't think that I'm putting a space in. So we do dash dash, one right after the other, no space between them. And then we hit enter. Or excuse me. I missed in doing that, I forgot a step, like a dummy. So we're gonna type this in again. Yaourt dash S Y Y Y U dash AUR. Excuse me, I left out the AUR on that part because I was fixated on trying to be sure that it was clear that there wasn't a space there between those two dashes. So and what this is telling you is telling Yaourt to check for your system upgrades and so on, and also, and this is important, also to check for any updates to packages that are on the Arch user repository. So what this one command is, and this is my preferred command, this is the one that I use to check for updates and so on, because it's not only going to check for updates and things to the system itself, it's also going to check to any of the packages and things that you've added from outside pacman, because pacman is your official repository. It's the programs that are official, kind of sanctioned, if you will, by Arch. But there's many, thousands, just tons of packages, software, in other words, that you can add that aren't on the official, pacman repositories. And so this is going to check. This is also going to check those as well, because, in all likelihood, you've probably got a lot of software that you've had to install to get the programs that you want off of the Arch user repository. Okay, so this is going to check everything. In other words, this is the one command that kind of does it all when it comes to updates. This is what my preferred command is. This is the one I would encourage you to use here in Antergos. So we've entered it in. It's yaourt space dash or minus symbol, whatever you want to call it. Capital SYYYU space dash no space between those two dashes. R AUR said our or R, and then we're going to hit enter. And you see it checking. So it's going to synchronize the package database, which is basically just kind of comparing your list, seeing if there's an update to your list. And then it's going to check your core database, your extra, community, multi-lib, which is something you have to enable yourself. I'm not going to get into that really, but you have to enable multi-libbers. And that just means that you can, if you're on a 64-bit system, it'll also check 32-bit programs. I'm not going to get into any of that. It's a little too complicated. And it'll also check the official, Antergos, which is the distribution that we're using. And then the orphans are just packages that don't really apply to anything anymore. They're not being updated or maintained right now. I leave them in because sometimes they will get picked back up and updated. So I leave them in. That a lot of people say, "Oh, you should get rid of them." I leave them in. It's not hurting anything, so I leave them in. And that's what all that is. You may have some of those yourself in your system. If it's a brand new system, likely not. But as your system kind of ages, you'll find more orphan packages. So I just leave those in, and you can see that there's no updates to do. The other command that you can use, if you don't want to use yaourt for this sort of thing, and you only want sort of those official packages and all, the command that you would use is you would use pacman, which is the package manager. Now this is a command that's not specific only to Antergos, like the yaourt command is, because you're using yaourt, which is a particular program. Pacman's what you use in Arch and all of its distributions, the distributions that are based on Arch, all of the forks. So this is universal to Arch. This is like aptitude is in Debian and Debian-based distributions, where you do sudo apt get. And that would be universal in the entire Debian universe. This is the equivalent of that. You're using pacman. You're going to be using pacman in any Arch-based distribution, like for example Antergos. So the command to do an update in pacman is to do pacman dash minus key, whatever you want to call it, S, capital S, Y, Y, U. Now, you see what it told me? This is error. You cannot perform this operation unless you are root. That tells me that I forgot to do one thing. And this is, don't fret if you see things like this, and this is one of the reasons why I'm kind of explaining it as I go along. All that means is that I didn't do sudo. Okay, I just entered in the command. I didn't tell it sudo. That tells the system it's going to prompt me for my password. It tells the system to elevate my privileges to that of root. I'm going to become a super user now, basically, is what it means. So, sudo, you want to enter in sudo pacman dash, dash syyu. And it's going to basically do the same thing. And it's going to start a full system upgrade, and then if it doesn't find anything, it's going to tell you that there's nothing to upgrade. Okay, so pretty simple. But again, I would use this first command up here. I would do the yaourt dash syyu dash dash a. That command is what I prefer to use. So, if we wanted to search for a package, in other words, if, for example, I'm wanting to install Mozilla Thunderbird, which that's a program that is an email manager. It's kind of like what Outlook, or is it? It's called Outlook, right? It's been so long since I've used it. I have to check on my other computer here. Microsoft Office. I think it's called Outlook, isn't it? Yeah, Outlook. So it's kind of like what Outlook is in Windows. If you have Word and all that, it's just an email manager. And I'm just using it as an example for a package. So if you were looking for that, but you didn't know the exact package name, that sort of thing, and you wanted to search for the package so that you could install it, how would you do that? Well, you're going to do, and it may do the whole thing that you saw it do up here, where it says you can't perform this operation unless you're root. I'm not sure. So we're going to try it without doing super user first. So we're going to do pacman dash capital S lowercase s, and then you're going to enter the package name that you're looking for. So you're going to do Mozilla. And if in my case, I have a fair idea what the package might be called. If you're not sure, then you can either leave it this way. You can do an asterisk after it, which it should check any packages that have that and then anything after it. So it's going to search for any package with that term in it. In my case, I'm pretty sure. But if you're searching for a package and you know what the name is, and there's a space in it, the thing that you have to remember is, it's like in my case, it's Mozilla Thunderbird. You can't type it this way, because this is a connected term, and it's only going to search for things for Mozilla, and it's going to ignore the Thunderbird after it. So it's kind of an error in your syntax there. So you have to remember that if there's a space there, you don't leave a space. You have to hit the dash key again, your minus symbol, in other words, and you have to type it in like this. Okay? And it doesn't find anything. So what we're going to do is we're going to do pacman dash ss Mozilla asterisk. And then you see it searches, and this is because it's using pacman, it's only searching for the official packages. Alright? And then this is going to come into play. This is going to be a key thing to notice when I get into these other commands that you can use to search for packages, because yaourt, as I explained, has tons more stuff for you to choose from, and this is kind of what I'm demonstrating to you now. But doing that Mozilla asterisk is going to search for all of the packages that, wherever it is that you're searching, which in this case is pacman. If we were using yaourt, it would search yaourt. It's going to search for all of them with Mozilla, and then anything else after it. So it's going to find Mozilla Firefox, it's going to find certificates Mozilla, it finds all of these. Okay, and there's no Thunderbird anywhere in there, so Thunderbird's not an official Arch package. But the key thing is, okay, and I want to kind of drive home the command itself. The key thing is you're going to, when you're searching for a package that you want to install, and you want to use pacman to do it, and this is key, you want to use pacman to do it, so you're only wanting an official package. You're not wanting an Arch user, an unofficial, in other words, package. You're wanting an official Arch package. The command is pacman dash s, capital S, then lowercase s, no spaces between them, and then the architecture is going to be that you enter in the package name that you're looking for after it. I used Mozilla as an example, as though I were looking for Thunderbird, but select that for any pack, and then the pack. So you're going to do pacman space dash or minus symbol, capital S at, and then lowercase s, and then a space, and then you're going to enter in the package name after it. Okay, the name of the package that you're looking for after it. So let's say we wanted to look for, I don't know, we were looking for Thunderbird as an example. Let's look for, I don't even know. let's look for anything Google. Okay, so let's say we're wanting to install Google Chrome. This will also help me kind of drive home another point I want to make too. Okay, and it looks and nowhere in here are you going to find Chrome. And the reason why is because Chrome is not an official Arch package. So this is where we get into the Arch user repository, okay? And why the Arch user repository is so important. And why you're going to want to use yaourt far more than you're ever going to want to use pacman, and at least in my experience. And this is the reason why. So we're switching now from pacman as a way of searching to using yaourt. And this is going to be a lot easier, both in terms of finding things, because you've got more to search from. You're more likely to find what it is that you're looking for. It's also going to be a little bit easier to actually install, because in this case, okay, I've just searched for it, all right. But then if I wanted to install it, I'm going to have to enter this in. I'm going to have to go, in other words, okay, now to install it. So if I were wanting to install, say, Mozilla Common, okay, which is already installed. But if I were wanting to install this, if I were wanting to install Mozilla Common, I'm now going to have to, in order to install it, because this is just searching, remember, this is to search for a package, just to find if the package is there, if I'm not sure of the name, to get the full name, okay? So now that I know the name of the package, I want to install it, I'm going to have to now come back down here, and I'm going to have to do sudo, because it's only going to let me install something. It's only going to let me change the system, in other words, if I'm elevated to root, excuse me, if I'm elevated to root user privileges. Okay, so that's what the sudo means. So I have to elevate my privileges to allow me to change the system. So I'm going to do sudo pacman-s, not dash capital S and then lowercase s, that's search, dash capital S space, and then I'm going to do Mozilla Common. Okay, and then I would hit enter, and then it would prompt me for my password if I haven't entered my password in already, you know, in doing some other function. And then I would enter my password, and then I would hit enter, and then it's going to install the package. So that's a little bit more complicated than what I'm getting ready to show you now. So let's say I'm wanting to search for Thunderbird. You know, we'll stick with Thunderbird as an example. Let's say I'm wanting to search for Thunderbird, and I'm wanting to use yaourt to do it. And this is where yaourt becomes, and searching Arch user repositories in general, becomes such a huge advantage to you. I'm going to do yaourt Mozilla. Now I could search for Mozilla Thunderbird, but I'm going to stick to what I showed you with the asterisk. So I'm going to search for anything and everything Mozilla with that asterisk symbol after that. So I'm going to do yaourt Mozilla, and I'm going to hit enter. What? Shouldn't have told me that. Let's see, maybe it doesn't like the asterisk. That's what it is. It doesn't like the asterisk. You don't need it in yaourt, I guess. If you just type in Mozilla, it's going to automatically. Yeah, that's what it is. It doesn't need the asterisk because it works a little bit differently. It's going to search for everything with that term in it anyway, so the asterisk is just redundant. That's why it didn't recognize it. So you just type in the term without the asterisk, and it's going to search for everything with that term in it. And somewhere we should see Thunderbird, maybe. This is kind of where playing around and learning how it works. There you go. Now we see Thunderbird. Now, if we wanted to install the program, and I'm not going to actually do this, by the way, but what you see happening in this list and this is important, what you see happening in this list is you see how it's a numbered list. So let's say I wanted to install multiple packages. Okay, I wanted to install Firefox, I wanted to install Firefox Beta, and I wanted to install Thunderbird, which we established was down here somewhere. Thunderbird, we'll say Thunderbird Nightly. That's French, but so let's say we wanted to install it. How would I do it? Well, it does tell you here, enter in, which is the number of packages to be installed. But what it's asking you, what it's telling you to do is the numbered list, you're going to enter the number in that corresponds to the package that you're wanting to install. So I want to install number 1, let's say, and number 20 and number 24. So I'm going to enter it in by entering in the number, and I'm going to just hit in for no. It's just going to throw it off because I don't want to actually change my system, in other words. But if I were wanting to install this program, those packages, programs, you can kind of use those interchangeably. I would enter in the numbers that I wanted. So I would enter in 1, and if I wanted to install this, I would enter in then 128. And if I wanted to install this program, I would enter in 136 with a space between each one, and then I would hit enter, and it's going to install all of those programs. And I'm sure it would give you a prompt. It would give you a warning and say you're going to change, you're going to do X, Y, and Z. I can try and find in this list here, is there anything that I would want to actually install as an example? Not really. So I don't really have an example. I could try and maybe reinstall that. That might work. Let's try that. Let's see if it'll do it if I reinstall it. So I'm going to do yaourt and Mozilla. And it gives you the list. Let's try it with a reinstall as an example and see if it shows the prompts that it's going to ask you. Because I want to give you a fair idea of the whole experience here. So 3. So I'm going to enter 3. So 3, enter. Asks me for my password, which I'm going to enter. There you go. And then you see that. And it's going to tell you it's going to reinstall it in my case. But it's going to, and then it's going to say proceed with the installation. You're going to press Y. If you want to install it, you're going to hit Y. If you don't, you're going to hit, press in and hit enter. But in our case, we want to install it. So we're going to hit Y, we're going to hit enter, and it's going to install it. And voila. The other thing I want to show you too about terminal. This is just an example of a terminal. In this case, it's console, which is KDE's. KDE being a desktop environment, it's KDE's terminal. But in any of the terminals, you have a history that you can use of the commands that you've entered, so that you don't have to enter the command every single time you want to use it. So, like if I press the up arrow key on my keyboard, there's the last term that I entered. If I hit it again, you see what's happening. The more times I hit it, I'm going back in the history. I can go back forward in the history as well. So if I want to go back to that command there, I can do the upgrade. That's the one I want to use, though, remember. So I'm just searching through in the history of commands that I've entered so that I don't have to type the whole thing out. That's all I'm doing. And now I'm going to do a check for an upgrade here. And there we go. So that's how you search for packages. And also I showed you how you would install them, both using pacman and yaourt. If I wanted to get information for a package, okay, so let's go back up. I'm going to be using pacman for this. I need to actually know the name of a package. So we'll say Mozilla Common is the package we're going to use as an example. Mozilla Common. If I want to get information about a package, I do pacman dash q, capital Q, I, and then I enter in the package name. I do space after the I, and then I'm going to type in the package name, which in our case, the example we're using is Mozilla Common, and then we hit enter, and it's going to find all of the information about this package. It gives me the name of the package, which I already kind of knew because I needed to know it in order to find the information. But it gives me the name of the package, the version. It gives me a description of it, the URL where it comes from, where the package originally comes from, the license, all of these types of things. Other more relevant data that you're going to want to know are things like the build date and the install date if you have it installed. That's all important things in certain instances. If you're curious about, like when you installed it or the install size, sometimes it'll tell you. In fact, it does tell you right there the install size. If you're curious about things like that, which depending on circumstances, you may need to know these kinds of things. That's how you find it out. Is you would do pacman space dash capital Q I space, then enter in the package name here, and then hit enter, and it's going to return all that information. And that's for a package that you have installed on your system. If you're looking for information for a package that you don't have installed on your system, so let's gotta go back up here. And you'll notice it does tell me if I have a package installed or not. So which ones of these do we not have installed? We'll use this as an example. Since we don't have this installed, this is a good example. And I can just highlight that, right click and copy. So you can do copy and paste and all in this too, which also makes things a little bit easier, so you don't have to remember all of this and then type it in. So come back down here. So I'm right now, just to refresh what I'm doing, this is if you're searching for information on a package that you do not have installed. This is for a package you do have installed. The pacman space dash capital Q I space and then package name is for a package you have installed. This is going to be for a package you do not have installed. Pacman space dash capital S I space, and then you're going to enter the package name in here, which I had to copy. So I'm just going to paste it, and then I'm going to hit enter, and then it finds all of the information. It tells me the repository, which in this case is the community repository. So you have core, remember, then you have community, you have multi-lib, all of that. And then it gives me a lot of that same information. It gives me the install size, the size it will be if installed. Okay. The download size, the package, the person that manages the package, that kind of thing. The build date, all of that. So we have the command that you use to search for a package that's on your system, and now the command you would use to search for a package that's not on your system. And I touched on this already, but I'll just retouch on it since it's in my notes as I'm scrolling down. To install a package using pacman, it is sudo pacman dash capital S and then the package name. So it would be like Mozilla Common as an example. And then you would hit enter, and it would tell you, are you sure you want to install yada yada Y, and you're going to hit Y and then you hit enter. To remove a package and keep its dependencies, and I'm not going to really get into what dependencies mean, but dependencies are basically other packages that it's going to pull in as it installs because it needs those dependencies to run. So like if it needs a GTK package or something like that, to be able to display icons and stuff properly, it'll pull that in. So if you want to keep those things, because maybe those things are needed in other programs or something, so this is to remove a package but keep its dependencies, you're going to do pacman, and it's likely going to be sudo that you're going to need. So I'm not going to type it in, it's just pacman. I'm going to show you. It's probably going to be sudo. You're probably going to need sudo in front of it. But at any rate, it's either pacman will work on its own, or it's sudo pacman. And I'm betting it's probably sudo pacman, so stick with this. Sudo pacman dash capital R, and then the package name here after it, after a space. Okay, so then the name of the package right there. Now, if I want to remove a package and remove the dependencies also, it's sudo space pacman space dash capital R S, and then the package name after a space, like that. So in order to keep the dependencies, it's just dash R space and then the package name. To remove the dependencies, it's dash RS space and then the package name. And then the S, by the way, is lowercase, as you can see. That's really all there is to it. There are, like I said, there are other commands that you can enter in. There's tons and tons and tons of other terminal commands that you might want to know, or at some point may even need to know to use Arch. But these are the ones that I use the most most commonly, most often. And I think if you know those, I haven't encountered any real need to use any others than those. The likelihood that you're going to encounter a need to use some of the more obscure ones is pretty slim, because like I said, I've been using this for months, and these are the ones that I'm using most often. The ones I use every day are this: yaourt space dash capital SYYYU space dash dash with no space between the dashes, R being AUR, enter. And this is just to do the updates and upgrades. Type in wrong here. Password wrong. This is the one I use the most often throughout the day to check for updates. And then obviously yaourt, and then your search for your package, like Mozilla. Those are the ones that I use the most often. I don't really find myself having to uninstall packages very often. I don't really find myself having to even do searches for the names of packages and so on very often, because again, I'm not using pacman. That's a pacman command. I don't really use pacman because I'm using yaourt. Yaourt searches it all on its own. It does it automatically. So I really, my day-to-day use, I'm only using 2 commands. And that's pretty much a real sort of quick crash course in Arch. And if you can do those few commands, you're going to be able to use Arch just fine. And now we're going to finish this video out, finalize it, and upload it to YouTube.